Hey you guys, it's Leslie. Welcome back to week 2 of this online class. Last week you painted with coffee and I hope you had so much fun doing that. I know I did. And we talked a little bit about how can you reuse materials at home to make art with. So we're going to stay on that theme this week and we're going to be collaging with recycled materials. So this week is all about collage. I am going to show you how to collage your own flower, and the goal this week is to collage a personalized garden for yourself. So include whatever plants or insects that you want in your own garden, and you will be using recycled materials to collage, okay? So I'm just gonna show you how to get started and do one flower in this video, and so it might look something like this. So let's get started and I'll show you what materials you will need for today. Alright, so in this lesson, you're going to need a glue stick or some type of glue to work with, a pencil, and also a pair of scissors, alright? That is not all you're going to need. You are also going to need found objects or recycled materials. So what I like to do is I like to go into my recycling bin and pick out anything that I think is interesting, anything that might have an interesting texture or color. So maybe pause right now and go and find some things around your house that are going to be thrown away and that have an interesting texture or color. Could be something like cardboard, paper, fabric, whatever you can find is great, okay? So pause and go find some interesting things to collage with. All right, you guys, so I just went into my recycling bin and grabbed some cardboard boxes. So I really like working with cereal boxes. Love Reese's Puff cereal. Can't go wrong with Reese's Puffs. But I love the bright colors in it. I also found this Ritz container. I love the bright red. You might want a variety of colors, so just keep that in mind. Most of these are kind of red though. But I also grabbed some newspaper. I think that's a really great thing to collage with. So yeah, for the base of my collage, I'm actually going to cut out one side of a cereal box and use that kind of as my base or my paper. So I will show you that in a second. Okay, so I cut out one side of the cardboard from the cereal box, and I'm just going to use this side as a base. It's kind of a clean slate, but it's also a little bit sturdy, so it works well. And then I'm going to pick a page in the newspaper that I like, because I like using this for the background of my collages. So I'm going to take my base, and I'm just going to trace the shape of it, and then I'm going to cut that out and glue it to my base, okay? So I traced it, and now I'm just gonna start cutting it out. All right, and then I'll glue it down to the paper, to the cardboard. Okay, so I have my newspaper glued down as the background for my garden collage, and I personally like newspaper. However, if you want like a sky as the background, you might want to pick something that's blue or looks like the sky, okay? So, and when you do this, just make sure you kind of smooth it out, hold one side down and then smooth it out so you know it's, there's no air bubbles, okay? So you can go ahead and pause if you want and get your background cut out and start gluing the background, okay? All right, so the first thing I'm going to do to get my flower started is I'm going to draw a circle for the middle of the flower. So I have a cup. You can freehand it, but if you have a cup to trace, that might be good. And I'm just going to trace where I know the middle of the flower is going to be. So I just know where to position all the petals, okay? So you can put that cup to the side. And now I am going to, based on all of my recycled material options, I found I had a lot of red, orange, and yellow, okay? So this is going to be a flower with multiple layers, and you can do as many layers as you want. I'd say maybe try to do whatever you're comfortable with. I'm going to try 3 different layers just to show you guys fully how to make this, okay? So I want my background layer to be yellow, and then I'm gonna go yellow to orange and then red on top. All right, so I'm gonna start making petals. The ones in the back should be a little bit bigger, okay? So I'm just going to make these petals. I'm going to trace them out on here like teardrop style. That kind of looks like a petal. They don't have to be perfect. They can be like a little like off if you want. If you really wanted it to be precise, you could trace it on the back and then cut it out so you didn't have any pencil marks, so you didn't have to worry about erasing that after. Yeah, and just have fun with it. They don't all have to be the same. I'm making these ones a little bit bigger because they're in the background, okay? So I'm going to cut these out and I'm going to paste them on there. Okay, so here you see I have some of my petals coming together. One thing I didn't mention, it might be a good idea when gluing your petals or any shapes that you glue over like a piece of cardboard that you're not going to use, or at least a placemat, just so you don't get your table super messy, okay, with glue. So here I have 5 petals, and I know you can't see the circle I traced very well, but it is there, and I just made sure that each of the petals is barely touching that circle I traced, okay? Also, note that the petals aren't right next to each other. They are a little bit spread out, okay? So that's okay if they're spread out. If they're together, that's okay too, but just in case, you know, you don't want to go too crazy trying to fill all the space. And then one thing I didn't mention is when you are collaging or painting, you always want to start with the background first. So I know we have the actual like newspaper background first, but like with this flower, I know that the yellow is going to be farthest in the back. So I'm putting that layer down first, okay? So the farther back it is, you want to put those layers down first and then work forward, okay? So we're putting the background layer of flowers, of petals down, and then we're working forward, okay? So I'm gonna do the exact same thing, except with orange cardboard, and I'm gonna put another layer of petals down. Okay, so I decided that I really like this cereal box for my next layer of petals, and I'm going to do the exact same thing I did with the yellow petals. I'm going to trace them onto the box. For this surface, it might be easier to trace on the back and then cut them out that way, but I love that there's a lot going on here. So for the yellow petals, that was pretty plain, like it's just straight yellow, but we have all these different oranges happening, and I think that is going to make this collage way better, the fact that it's not just plain orange, okay? So again, I am going to trace some petals just like I did here. They're just going to be slightly smaller, but they could be the same size if you wanted to, and then I'm going to glue them down, okay? Okay, so I'm starting to glue on my second layer, and notice how I'm kind of going in between the petals from the first layer, okay? So, and they're overlapping. They are still touching that first circle that I traced, okay? So I'm going to keep gluing these down. One thing that I completely forgot was the stem, okay? So like we said, we're working backward, like farthest back to front. That probably should have been glued on in the first place. Okay, so if you forgot just like me, don't worry, you can add it. Even if you have a petal right there, that's okay, do your best, okay? You know, it's okay if it's not perfect. It's kind of all about the journey, right? So I have my stem, and then I cut out a flower. One method you can do if you have a really good kind of like hand-eye coordination, you can try actually ripping these shapes out instead of cutting them. I like to do that sometimes. For me, I think with the thickness of the cardboard that I am using, it's going to be a little bit easier just to cut it out instead of rip, because sometimes ripping is unpredictable. Okay, so I'm adding this last little petal for the second layer. And what I'm going to do next is I'm going to add a third layer of petals that is going to be kind of a darker red, and that's going to go on top of these. They are going to be smaller in size so that you can still see the like yellow petals coming through, okay? And then the last part, I'm going to put that circle in the middle, all right? So I'm gonna go ahead, find my Ritz crackers box and start cutting those out. Okay, so I have just glued down that third layer of petals with my red Ritz crackers box. Whoop, that one came off. Yeah, sometimes you need to kind of like put your finger on it for a second for it to stick. All right, so especially with a thicker cardboard, so just be patient with it. I know it's like kind of a lot. Okay, so now I want to do the middle of my flower, and I'm going to take that same cup from earlier and I'm going to trace it on top of some yellow paper, okay? I kind of like the idea of having this color from the background layer appear again in the middle, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and cut, I'm going to trace that cup, cut it out, and put it in the middle, okay? If you are not a fan of this style of flower, that is okay. You do not have to do it. You can make whatever type of flower you want. 1 layer, 2 layers, whatever it is. Maybe it's a tulip and has a completely different shape and style to it. Maybe you want to do a cactus. It is your garden, remember. It is your garden, so put whatever you want in it, okay? Okay, so I just added the middle of the flower. I kind of like how the yellow here is also the same yellow here. I think that's kind of a nice touch. All right, the main thing I want you guys to think about when you are creating your own garden is making sure that you are working from back to front, meaning putting that first layer down that is farthest back and then kind of working forwards and putting layers on top of that, okay? And then also thinking about like with your recycled materials, maybe jumping back and forth between plain colors and then like some that are more patterned and then going back to maybe plain again. So kind of switching it up with that. Like these ones are really smooth. However, this one is kind of like an interesting texture, and then we have another pattern over here, all right? So whatever it is you're making, just keep those two things in mind. Also, one thing you can add, this is just a start, okay? So one thing that I'm thinking about adding is probably maybe some grass, some blades of grass, maybe a ladybug or a butterfly, or a worm maybe. But add some insects into your garden, add some other types of flowers. If I was to make a whole garden here, I might have worked on a bigger surface, or I would have made this smaller to kind of make some room for some other flowers, okay? So create your own garden, do what you think is going to be best. And I think I will add maybe a ladybug or some type of bug for you guys to see, all right? Okay, so as you can see, I added a ladybug and I added some grass here. One thing I want you to note about the insects is that I would recommend making them bigger than you think they are, just because it's easier to cut out all the details. Even though these are just circles, it's still hard to cut those in like really small. So just make it a little bit bigger than you would normally. So one thing, I wasn't planning on doing the grass for this demo, but I did because I just think it pulls it together a little bit more. I did have to tear this leaf off and then reattach it on top of the grass. So maybe put the grass down in one of the first few steps if you'd want. Might make your life a little bit easier. But again, I want you guys to think about what plants and insects you want to include in your own garden. You could add a Venus flytrap. You could add a cactus. Maybe you want to make your garden a vegetable garden, and maybe you add tomatoes and carrots or something like that. Okay, so this is one example of how to collage. However, do whatever is calling your name, okay? So make it your own and be creative and have fun with it. In this video, I've shown you guys how to start making your own collaged gardens. So my hope for you guys is that you continue making your own garden at home. You put in whatever plants or insects you want, and you really make it yours. Have fun with it. Be creative, and try to find some interesting materials to collage with. The weirder they are, the better. Okay, so that's it for today, and I can't wait to see you guys next week for another fun lesson.